From niche insurance, we move to another industry niche, airports, specifically Auckland Airport. Their focus is a twofold strategy of rebuilding and bettering themselves after COVID-19. Firstly, safely reconnecting New Zealand with the rest of the world. Secondly, enabling trigger-based infrastructure by having up-to-the-minute information to which it can respond and keep everyone safe. At the core of this two-pronged approach is data transformation. Let's take flight with Jonathan Good, General Manager of Technology and Marketing from Auckland Airport for this story of metamorphosis.
Hello, my name is Stephanie Krishnan. I'm the Associate Vice President for IDC Insights in Asia Pacific, responsible for manufacturing and energy research in the region. I'm joined here today by Jonathan Good, who's the Chief Technology and Marketing Officer at Auckland Airport. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hi, Stephanie. Great to be here.
Great, fantastic. And today we're here to discuss the operational improvements that Auckland Airport has done with the onslaught of COVID and the impact of freight and passenger transportation and the myriad of complexities that are going through with immigration requirements, etc. There have been tremendous pressures on your business and on businesses, transportation business, particularly air transportation businesses around the region. I'm sure you're seeing a lot of issues arise, as well as dealing with the infrastructure and the fundamental requirements or the fundamental strains that this has put on the economy as a whole, and you guys would be bearing the brunt of it. Yeah. So maybe we could start with talking about some of the opportunities that have you seen opportunities to take up improvement here? We've seen that you've undergone some significant changes. Perhaps you could outline some of the challenges, and then we can look at exactly what changes you're going through.
Great question, Stephanie. We've had a lot of change and a lot of challenge. People do think about airports as a place where there are a lot of passengers connecting, the love actually moments. But behind the scenes of the 21 million passengers that we help transport per year, there's a massive freight business that connects New Zealand with the world. We'd see around about $15 billion worth of freight passing through our airport every year. And it takes about 15,000 people across the whole transportation sector at Auckland Airport, including, freight forwarders and logistics businesses, to make that work. And so when COVID hit, the need for connection became even greater. We have a lot of medical, critical services that needed to get through. But the 80% of freight that was carried in belly hold was no longer being supported. And so we saw different services, new services, and we needed to help support that. And at the same time, the sector was obviously really struggling and a lot less resourcing. And so that was what really led to the impetus for, more digital transformation to help make sure that we could keep New Zealand as a small country at the bottom of the world connected with the rest of the global supply chain to help make sure that those critical supplies and exports could get through.
Yeah, so you do say that a lot of this did start before COVID, and we say in the industry that COVID was more a trigger or an accelerator for digital transformation. So obviously it seems to have been. Did it change the priorities for you, and were there some areas that demanded more immediate attention?
Yeah, I think we'd certainly say that COVID was an accelerator. We were already well underway on digital transformation, and what we'd been doing were more things that helped augment our business as we faced into the challenges of growth. So we were building new digital experiences for passengers with the Mall as our online duty-free platform, our Auckland Airport app and loyalty program. So things that were really augmenting and adding capability and functionality. And the change from COVID is it really hit our business in its heart and challenged us to think differently about our core. And at the same time, it made possible changes that in regular times wouldn't really have been possible, because there were chances to coordinate the system, to get people to work together, and to run transformation in a way that had a little bit more of a change burden that probably wouldn't have been acceptable. And that's what's, I think really helped with the different priorities. That's been much more foundational, really lifting and shifting our data architecture, reworking our data services agreement, and actually helping, really take a total airport management view as we talk about it, where all of the different players across the transportation and airport system in Auckland are able to coordinate, work together, and we have, these joint decisioning and data identification tools. So, a couple of examples that might be of interest. One is around the sort of data architecture and data tools, but another is around thinking differently about our emergency responses. We're running a 24/7 fire and emergency response station, and the importance of contextual information and decisioning tools there has obviously been incredibly vital. And so again, we've gone to the core of the issue rather than starting at the outside and adding and augmenting.
Great. So this actually resonates with us, because at IDC we see the future of operations as being something that encompasses the operational transformation that is required to enable that flexible, market-centric, and certainly aligning with the ecosystem, to make sure that you do build that resilient operational base. And I think that allows you to more dynamically change to meet customer requirements and address market changes. And that's something that we've actually identified as part of our future of operations practice. So you did mention that you do have this data aspect, or data governance aspect to your operations. Some organizations see this as a prerequisite before starting serious digital transformation, and others see this more as a journey that goes alongside some of their other use cases. How is this for Auckland Airport? You have mentioned that you have put some in at the core to make sure that you do have that foundation, but was it something you had to do first, or did it come alongside?
Yeah, I think this is a place where we definitely differ from the textbook that would say you need to have your data governance in place first. As an organisation, data governance is probably a little bit more federated and less mature than you might see in some of the, sort of core manufacturing businesses, and certainly other places that I've worked. And that, reflects the fact that we're a diverse business across, retail, property, infrastructure, and federal models really worked quite well for us in that regard. And so, I guess the option of, get data governance in place first and then, proceed with the data transformation is something that, we couldn't afford in time or money. It would take a long time to be prepped and a lot of investment. And so instead, what we've been doing is building governance, maturity, and capability as we transform. And that's actually worked really, really well. And it, at times it's felt, challenging and new, and there's the imperfections that you have to manage. But I think it means that we're actually getting to a really great result, because there's a real focus on the pieces as we're injecting governance and shifting them across to our new data lake and data pipelines. The stakeholders are really invested in getting that right. They see the hard work of setting it up, and they want to make sure that it's maintained. And at the same time, because we're progressively, decommissioning and turning off what used to be, we're cleansing ourselves of the legacy that, in other places I've seen to be the thing that sort of fights back and, erodes and undermines that governance. And so, we're only a few steps along on the journey, but the sort of progressive model of, integrating governance into the transformation seems to be working really well.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about turning off that legacy, because I think that the temptation for organisation system can often erode their transformation efforts in that way. I think that's a really interesting point. So if we turn to some of the specific projects you've been working on, maybe we could go through some of the specifics of these. And if we can start with, artificial intelligence, which, you and I have talked about before, in IDC's recent Future of Operations survey, for example, 85% of participants from the Asia-Pacific transport and logistics industry actually consider AI or machine learning important or critical to achieving operational excellence and resilience. Yeah. Have you seen success with AI and machine learning? And if so, where was it used and what was the business case? How do you feel that the technology has impacted the business?
We've been working on a concept at Auckland called Total Airport Management. So the idea is, how do we have a smart systems view, like a smart city, that looks across all of our different platforms? So the infrastructure, the roading, the operational level, as well as the customer and consumer interfaces. So we've been, firstly connecting that data and then using AI and machine learning to look across it to provide better, predictions, with a real focus on how do we move from day of operations thinking, where we respond to what happens at the airport and try and, constantly trying to catch up to what the plan used to be. And instead, we're trying to shift the paradigm so that we're planning and predicting, with better insight and intelligence. And then the further view is, how do we move from that to a system that is self-healing and sentient and is actually able to really think about optimizing, each individual's journey, to optimizing the connection points between, freight and bags and people and planes, to make sure that those things work seamlessly and we're delivering the outcomes that we're looking for on, a customer experience, efficiency and capacity, and a sustainability view. We've started by looking at passengers and congestion. That's been a process that's been massively impacted by COVID, and looking at how passenger profiles, show up times, and new requirements around health and security can be met. So we've piped together our data from disparate systems that didn't used to be connected, as well as data from ecosystem partners. And then we've been able to use machine learning to look across that and provide better and better predictions. And it's really, really interesting because the context has been shifting very fast. So, here in New Zealand, we've had, strong domestic travel. We had the reopening of Trans-Tasman travel with quarantine-free travel. And then we've had, abrupt closures as well. And so, you might from the outside think that would make, learning algorithms less effective. But actually, what we found is that they've been incredibly effective and fast to respond when we use them well. So, we've got a couple of seasoned data scientists who are able to, help make sure that we're using them effectively. But they've been incredibly impressed by how well, the core tools are able to deliver predictions. And we've transformed ourselves from being able to run, a handful of scenarios each week to try and plan what the following week looks like, to being able to run, dynamic optimization of scenarios in real time. And so when we get, a change in context, we can quickly change not only our actions, but also those of others at the airport. And where that, really turns up and makes a difference is when we see, tomorrow's predicted, we had an example where we saw, tomorrow's predicted queue was going to peak at, around about a few hundred people at 8 in the morning, and we could see actually that the trigger for that came back to a shift pattern that needed to be moved by 15 minutes by one of the agencies here at Auckland Airport, and we're able to talk to them about that, make the small adjustment, and that actually translated through into a queue-free journey for passengers, which obviously in regular times is a great experience, and in the COVID era is also critically important from a health perspective.
That's great. It sounds like with that you've effectively built a digital twin of your airport. You've mentioned Auckland's airport's master plan, and you've got the integration happening from multiple data sources. So effectively, it seems like you can simulate a lot of the operations that are happening in the airport. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're working towards I guess a more full-fledged digital twin. So we've got, I guess, two different paths towards that. One, as I was just discussing, around the operational flows and understanding, from our capacity modelling, we do some simulations of traffic on our roading network, those sorts of pieces of flow information. And then from the other tack, we've also been working hard on our on our building information management systems and a whole bunch of really interesting tools to help us as an infrastructure company and asset owner to make sure we're providing world-class infrastructure and that we're managing that really, really well over the life cycle. And we've been doing some really interesting and novel things there as well.
Great. So, obviously, and I'm intrigued by the use case or the example you mentioned with, changing shift patterns and working with other organizations. Obviously, there are benefits, but there's also some challenges and barriers that you would experience there. One of the ones I'm hearing is a lot of data sharing and cross collaboration. Has that been key to enabling a lot of capabilities, and have you had some challenges in perhaps getting people across and collaborating and willing to share data?
Yeah, great question, and I think it's it's something that at the outset we expected to be very, very difficult, and in a strange way, as a silver lining of COVID, I think all of the organisations through the aviation sector here in Auckland have had a really, really challenging time these past 18 months. And unfortunately, that means, that means less resources. But that also means, people are willing to share in order to help keep things going. And so there has been more of a willingness and openness to collaboration, and that's, both inside organisations and across. And with a sort of really clear line of sight to how this helps, everyone involved, that it's not, just for Auckland Airport's benefit, it's actually for the system. And that sort of, guiding star view that, for New Zealand and, for the sort of rebuild of the sector here, it's really, really critical that we get these things right. So I think that's helped foster it. I think it's also been our approach, though, to be honest, that, we didn't start off by saying, we're going to transport ourselves to the top of Everest. We've taken a really strong, agile approach, and we started by chalking up, some small but clear wins. And I think that's something that, is too often overlooked in these journeys, because when you get to the end, you see all the great things that have been achieved. But it's the little wins that get people more and more invested and help build that followership and collaboration that really makes big things possible.
So in terms of change management, promoting the internal wins or the small wins internally sounds like it was a key part of that. Would there be any other things that you would recommend for people to take on as part of that change management process? Because obviously you are going to impact processes and business and the way that people work. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that can be really, really threatening as well, right? And I think, it's important to realise that. And so we've had a fantastic partnership, within our organisation with our operations and finance teams. And, those are areas where, people could think, oh my gosh, we literally had, a person who would spend their week running the scenario models. Right, and it could be really threatening that we're going to be able to use AI to generate that, without human intelligence or just overseen. But we've had this really clear narrative, and we've lived up to that as one of our values, that we're actually creating, the opportunity to get better leverage out of our people. And so rather than, sitting waiting for your computer to process for large periods of time, we're actually able to, help people add better value. And that's as true for our operations teams who, aren't seeing this as something threatening that's going to, lead to some sort of loss of jobs or loss of autonomy. We're actually providing them with the data and decision recommendations at their fingertips that help make them make better decisions. And so it's actually that sort of, that ethos around enablement. But that's something that's come through deeply from our team, and not from having, dedicated change management on our team, but actually from the individuals on our team holding, those as the sort of cultural aspirations of what we're trying to deliver.
Yeah, and I think when it's embedded in the team, right down to the floor, so to speak, then I think that's when you really see a change take hold, and there will still be pockets of resistance, but it becomes easier as you go through that journey, I'm sure. In terms of COVID-19, I mean, we've talked about it as being an impact for change, and you've mentioned about social distancing and keeping passengers, and of course you'd have to have staff safe as well. Have you had to deal with remote working and restrictions during COVID, and have you used anything to improve the accessibility or mobility of systems and data in order to keep the airport running?
Yeah, we were pretty well set up before COVID to be able to support flexible working and enable people to access systems from where they needed to. That said, I mean, we hadn't anticipated that everyone would work from home for such prolonged periods of time. And we do still have our operational crew that's literally keeping the lights on and keeping, critical lifeline service running at the airport. So, we've made some changes to make sure that works better in the long run. But that's something that I guess we can generally thank our architectural decisions earlier for making sure that we're building things in a way that was flexible and dynamic and supported that. And then mostly, we've had a strong focus on helping make sure people can make the most of the tools, because it's one thing to say you can access the same tools at home that you can access at work. But as I think we've all learned, working from home, in different levels of lockdown is quite a different challenge from flexible working. And when everyone's remote, or when large swathes of people are remote, it's also quite a different challenge. And so, they're using the technology, amplifying some of the fantastic new features and enhancements that have been coming through from, the big cloud providers, so that people know what they are and feel, versed and empowered to use them, has been a big part of the program as well.
Great. So just to wrap up, and usually IDC, we wrap up with guidance. And so, do you have any guidance for those going down this path? We would normally talk about, the development of a roadmap. And I noted that you're praising the early infrastructure decisions that you've made that have enabled some of the remote accessibility capabilities that you have, and that allows organizations to scale technology investments and certainly leverage, existing capabilities that are already, incumbent in the system. And also you've mentioned about, amplifying some of the capabilities that partners of, technology partners have enabled. And, they are typically points of guidance that we would offer, build a roadmap that allows you to scale that technology use, get advice from partners, make sure that you're able to utilize all the full strengths of their systems and their capabilities. Would there be anything that you would add to organizations that are going down, a digitalization path, and what to look out for and what to embrace?
I think those are really great points, and there's a reason that they're great guidance from IDC. I mean, you have to start with a roadmap. You're not going to walk a very good path if you don't have a plan. And I think it doesn't have to be the perfect roadmap. You should treat it as a living in a dynamic plan. And the world throws all sorts of things at us that we have to learn to manage. But if you have a charted course of, in different levels of granularity, what we're trying to achieve, we sort of talk about, the quarter, the year, the sort of 3 years, and the 10 years. And, we have quite different expectations of what we know on those different time horizons, but that really helps us make sure that we're making the right decisions about when, we're willing to make bolder calls, where we're trying to, bridge across something, and how much we're willing to invest. And then, secondly, as you say, it is about partners in the ecosystem. And I would just encourage people to, leverage that, finding great partners to work with you on this makes such a difference. We've been lucky to have some phenomenal partners engage with us on ours. But it's also about talking to the others around you. And, for us in aviation and transportation, that's one community. But, I think any business has a bunch of, suppliers, partners, and customers that are very, very good sources of advice for what to focus on. But I think the other piece of advice, I would say is that you really need to take an agile approach and to get started, and that's that's something that is easier said than done. But there's the moment when you actually really get started, and it goes from being the sort of shelf art, and the sort of the PowerPoints into an engineer who's actually deploying some code, and that's a big step. And then if you have a roadmap and you have the right partners and you've got a little bit of that initial momentum, it's that imperfection that starts to be the snowball, right? And then the snowball starts the avalanche. And so actually, momentum is a really, really strong indicator here too. And so I just encourage people to take that step. It can feel a bit uncomfortable, and to really start to build some momentum and making change, because digital is transforming the world, and you really want to be a part of it.
Great. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time here today, Jonathan. I'm here today with Jonathan Good, who's the Chief Technology and Marketing Officer at Auckland Airport, and he's been sharing some of his insights from transforming the operations at Auckland Airport. Thank you again for your time here today. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks so much for having me, Stephanie.
Hello, everyone. It is now my pleasure to announce the regional winner of IDC's Future Enterprise Awards 2021, the best in future of operations. As IT and operations technologies converge, companies must unify operational data streams with data from the rest of the enterprise. IDC calls this new IT-OT convergence digital engineering. It's a necessity to catalyze towards Industry 4.0 and to support resilient decision-making. And the winner is the organisation whose converged IT-OT does just that. Without further ado, the regional award winner is Unilever China.
On behalf of Unilever China, we are very honored for receiving the 2021 IDC Asia Tech Best in Future of Operations Award. In fact, Future Fit is a key theme in our Unilever's digital transformation strategy. It's reflected in the way we approach our organization design and culture development. For example, our corporate digital talent program and agile way of working. It's also reflected in our integrated architecture and platform approach, establishing a cloud-native digital technology foundation that is inclusive of so-called middle platform layers such as business application services, big data, AI, and algorithms. Empowered by our ever-growing digital talents and platform assets, we are able to continuously create and iterate through various digital capabilities and solutions in consumer, customer-facing domains, in supply chain, intelligent manufacturing, as well as in digital workspace. IT value focus is shifting more towards responsiveness of evolving market and business demands, as well as greater system resilience and extensibility in the new digital era.
And we'd like to congratulate Unilever China for bagging IDC's Future of Operations Awards. Applause and congratulations to you.
Way out there, don't you think? A sentient airport that is able to self-heal and respond to issues with the best customer experience in mind. Well, with that, we take off to Mandai Zoo in our next episode.